was from Elite Syncopations by the great African-American composer Scott Joplin, the son of a slave who's often referred to by his nickname, the King of Ragtime. Ragtime is a musical genre that developed in America in the 1890s on the fringes of society, in the underworld of pool halls, saloons, houses of prostitution. In the red light district, societal customs about everything from sex to segregation were ignored. Everybody there was an outcast, so there was more racial intermingling there than anywhere else in town. As white and black musicians gathered there, mixed and traded ideas, a remarkable fusion took place. White musicians contributed European notions about harmony and key relationships, while black musicians introduced ideas about polyrhythms. It was during this interchange that ragtime was born. The word ragtime is derived from the phrase ragged time, a tearing apart of time due to syncopated rhythms. Syncopation refers to the superimposition of an irregular rhythm over a regular rhythm, a disturbance of the basic meter or pulse. In piano ragtime, the left hand plays a steady march-like rhythm, 4 beats to a measure, with accents on the first and third beats. So this is the left hand in piano ragtime. The right hand, meanwhile, anticipates the beat, delays the beat, sometimes drops unexpectedly between beats. So the left hand, when you add the right hand, what you hear is one can make a case that the basic tension embodied in ragtime between the metrical, rigid bass lines and the danceable, exuberant melodic lines represents the struggle and eventual triumph of freedom over slavery. Now, it was this rhythmic element that was most shocking to white listeners who were exposed to ragtime for the first time in the 1890s. Ragtime was largely invented by the first generation of freeborn, self-taught black pianists like Scott Joplin, but its roots can easily be traced to the slave experience. When slaves were brought over from Africa to America, it was not unusual for slave owners to group together slaves from different tribes who spoke different dialects in order to reduce the likelihood of a slave revolt. As a result, the slaves communicated with one another via drumming, foot tapping, hand clapping. They developed a rich, complex, elaborate vocabulary of rhythm as a means of communication. Slaves were also accustomed to singing in order to make their arduous workdays more bearable, and their singing often took the form of call and response, which is a format that pervades all African vocal music. Scott Joplin uses the call and response pattern in his piano rags. In The Entertainer, for instance, listen to how the second phrase serves as a direct commentary on the first phrase. Here's the call. And the response. Another call. The response. Scott Joplin was a refined, dignified, unassuming, soft-spoken, even-tempered man, but as he entered his late 40s, his behavior became increasingly erratic. He developed paranoid delusions. He was convinced that people were trying to steal his manuscript scores. He became profoundly depressed. He actually burned his manuscripts. He developed facial tics, motor incoordination. His piano playing completely deteriorated. He had a dramatic cognitive decline. First, he started struggling, finding simple words, and eventually his speech became incoherent and unintelligible. He was hospitalized at Manhattan Psychiatric Center, where he lived out the final months of his life. Cause of death on the death certificate was listed as dementia paralytica due to neurosyphilis. So it seems as though the houses of prostitution, which were such valuable venues during the birth of Ragtime, were ultimately responsible for his untimely and excruciating death. In 1917, which was the year that Joplin died, psychiatric hospitals were filled with patients like Joplin, who had neuropsychiatric disorders of the brain due to late-stage syphilis, and there were no known effective treatments until penicillin was introduced in the 1940s. Scott Joplin died in poverty. His body was dumped into an unmarked grave.